There is a type of person who understands exactly how you feel. They read the room before anyone else does. They notice when something is wrong before you have said a word. They ask the right questions. They remember the details. They make you feel seen in a way most people never have. And then they use all of that against you. Not obviously. Not clumsily. With precision. Because the same emotional intelligence that allows them to understand you deeply also allows them to manipulate you in ways you cannot detect until the damage is already done. This is the dark empath. And research now suggests they may be the most psychologically dangerous personality type in existence. More so than the classic narcissist, more so than the psychopath, more so than anyone who announces their toxicity early enough for you to protect yourself. The dark empath never announces anything. They simply understand you. And in that understanding, they find every lever worth pulling. To understand what a dark empath is, you first need to understand what it is not. The classic dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, describes personalities that are dangerous largely because they lack empathy. The narcissist sees other people as extensions of themselves. The psychopath experiences no genuine emotional resonance with others. The Machiavellian treats people as pieces on a board. All three are dangerous. But they are dangerous in ways that, with enough time and enough attention, become visible. The coldness eventually shows. The self-absorption eventually surfaces. The manipulation eventually becomes detectable because it is operating without a full emotional map of the person being manipulated. The dark empath is different because they are not operating without empathy. They have it. Fully. Functionally. They feel into other people with genuine accuracy. They understand emotional states, unspoken needs, hidden fears, and private wounds with a clarity that most people find extraordinary and initially experience as deeply connecting. The darkness is not in the absence of empathy. It is in what empathy is being used for. In 2021, psychologists Nadia Haim and Alexander Sumich at Nottingham Trent University published research that identified the dark empath as a distinct personality cluster. People who score high on dark triad traits and high on cognitive empathy simultaneously. Their findings were striking. Dark empaths were more common than pure dark triad personalities. They were rated as more likable on first impression. And they caused significantly more psychological harm in close relationships than individuals who lacked empathy entirely. The reason is simple. You cannot defend against someone you trust completely. And trust is the dark empath's primary weapon. Not because they manufacture it artificially, but because the connection they offer is, in its early stages, genuinely real. There is a distinction in psychology between cognitive empathy and affective empathy that is essential to understanding how the dark empath works. Affective empathy is feeling what another person feels. It is the automatic, involuntary resonance that makes you wince when someone gets hurt, that makes you cry at a film, that makes another person's distress register in your own nervous system. It is empathy as emotion. Cognitive empathy is understanding what another person feels. It is the capacity to accurately model another person's emotional state, to know what they are experiencing, to see the world through their perspective, without necessarily feeling it yourself. It is empathy as information. The dark empath has high cognitive empathy. They know what you feel. They understand it precisely. But that knowledge does not necessarily translate into care for your well-being. It translates into a detailed, accurate map of your inner world. And a map, in the wrong hands, is not a path to connection. It is a blueprint for exploitation. This is what makes the dark empath fundamentally different from the cold manipulator. The cold manipulator is guessing about what you feel, applying general principles, reading surface signals. The dark empath knows. The difference in accuracy is the difference between a pickpocket working a crowd and a surgeon with a scalpel. One is opportunistic. The other is precise. Recognize what this looks like in practice. Because it does not look like manipulation. Not at first. Not even in the middle stages. It looks like the closest, most understanding relationship you have ever had. The dark empath remembers everything you tell them. Not because they are taking notes, because they are genuinely tracking you. Your fears, your insecurities, the story you told about your father, the way your confidence collapses under a specific kind of criticism, the thing you want more than anything but have never quite been able to say out loud. All of it is filed. All of it is understood. All of it will surface again at some point, sometimes to comfort you, sometimes to destabilize you, sometimes to remind you subtly that they know things about you that no one else does. The initial phase of a relationship with a dark empath often feels like finding someone who finally, truly gets you. The intensity of being understood at that depth is intoxicating. It produces a bond that forms faster and feels more solid than most relationships you have experienced. You share things you would normally take months or years to say. Because the environment they create, the quality of their attention, the accuracy of their understanding, feels safe in a way that bypasses your usual caution. That bond is the architecture of the control that comes later. Because once you have shared your inner world with someone that completely, you are no longer in a symmetrical relationship. They have a map of you. You have whatever version of themselves they have chosen to show you. And those two things are not equal. The manipulation tactics a dark empath uses are distinctive precisely because they are delivered through the language of care. Guilt is the primary tool. And it lands differently when it comes from someone who genuinely understands your emotional landscape. A cold manipulator uses guilt clumsily. You owe me, after everything I have done. A dark empath uses guilt surgically, with a quiet tone, a specific reference to something you said about yourself months ago, a carefully timed observation about how their needs seem to always come last. They make you feel like the problem without ever making a clear accusation. The guilt arrives wrapped in the language of vulnerability, which means your empathy, your care for them, becomes the mechanism of your own manipulation. Intermittent reinforcement is another signature. The alternation between warmth and withdrawal, between being deeply present and subtly unavailable, creates an anxiety loop in the person on the receiving end. You find yourself working to recover the warmth, adjusting your behavior to avoid the withdrawal, monitoring the relationship's temperature with a vigilance that gradually becomes exhausting. This is not accidental. The dark empath understands intuitively, or learns through observation, that inconsistency creates attachment. That the most powerful bond is not the consistently loving one, it is the unpredictable one, the one where you are never quite sure where you stand. They also use your self-knowledge against you. If you have told them you tend to be too sensitive, they will use that against you when you object to something they have done. See, there you go again, being too sensitive. If you have told them you struggle with trust, they will frame any questioning of their behavior as your trust issues resurfacing. They take the honest self-disclosure you offered in moments of genuine intimacy and repurpose it as a defense against accountability. There is an important question that the research does not fully resolve. Are dark empaths conscious of what they are doing? The answer is, sometimes. Not always. And the cases where they are not conscious are, in some ways, the most disorienting for the people around them. Some dark empaths operate with full awareness. They understand their own patterns, they recognize the dynamic they are creating, and they choose it because it serves their needs. These people are calculating in the truest sense. But a significant proportion of dark empaths are operating from a pattern they did not consciously construct and do not fully see. The emotional intelligence was developed as a survival skill, often in a childhood environment where reading adults accurately was necessary for safety. The manipulation emerged not from malice but from the accumulated adaptations of a person who learned early that direct need expression was dangerous, that emotional leverage was more reliable than vulnerability, that understanding others deeply was the only reliable form of control available in an unpredictable world. This does not excuse the harm, but it changes the psychological picture. You can be genuinely damaged by someone who does not know they are damaging you, and you can understand how they became who they are while still recognizing that you cannot stay in the radius of what they do. Knowing how to recognize the pattern is the beginning of protecting yourself from it. Not paranoia. Not a blanket distrust of people who understand you well. Genuine empathy is one of the most valuable things a human being can offer. But a specific attentiveness to the combination of signals that distinguishes the dark empath from the genuinely empathic person. The genuinely empathic person's understanding of you makes you feel more free, more yourself. Their knowledge of your inner world is held with care, not deployed strategically. Their attunement increases your confidence rather than your anxiety. When they know your vulnerabilities, you feel safer, not more exposed. The dark empath's understanding of you gradually makes you feel less free, more careful, more monitored. Their knowledge of your inner world creates an asymmetry you cannot quite name but start to feel. You begin to notice that you are always the one adjusting. Always the one explaining yourself. Always the one whose self-doubt is surfacing while their confidence remains untouched. Trust the shift. Not the explanation for the shift that the dark empath will offer, which will almost always be framed in terms of your psychology, your patterns, your issues. Trust what your nervous system is registering before your mind has found the language for it. There is something worth sitting with after understanding all of this. The dark empath exists on a spectrum. Not everyone who has dark triad traits and high cognitive empathy is operating at the extreme end. Some people carry this combination in ways that are less harmful, more contained, more self-aware. Human personality is not a set of fixed categories. It is a landscape, and most people occupy a position somewhere in the middle of it rather than at the poles. But the core dynamic, using emotional understanding as a tool for control rather than connection, exists in milder forms in relationships that are not clinically or dramatically toxic. In the partner who always seems to know exactly how to make you doubt yourself. In the friend whose support always comes with a subtle cost. In the colleague whose understanding of your insecurities surfaces at the most convenient moments for them. Emotional intelligence is not inherently good. It is a capacity. Like any capacity, what it produces depends entirely on what it is in service of. When emotional intelligence is in service of genuine connection, of seeing another person clearly and holding what you see with care, it is one of the most extraordinary things one human being can offer another. When it is in service of the self alone, of reading others to manage them, of understanding feelings to leverage them, it becomes something else entirely. The difference is not always visible from the outside, but it is always, eventually, felt from the inside. Pay attention to what you feel.